control it to the PC one time, bro. It should start tweaking. Bro, are you serious, bro? Like, bro, I just plugged this in one time. Bro, why is my controller not working, bro? You plug your controller in one time, bro. Oh my god, Lord. Like, what is the problem, bro? Why is my controller not? Why is this not working, bro? Shit is retarded, my nigga. I literally can't do anything, bro. This shit's acting stupid, bro. Acting retarded, bro. Sorry. Like, come on, bro. Plug it into the PC one time and it messes up everything. How does that make sense, bro? This is stupid, bro. Absolutely ridiculous, bro. There should be no reason that my controller is not controlling the Xbox, bro. Like, what is so difficult, bro? Like, connect, bro.
inspired me tremendously. That is Wicker Man. I haven't seen the original 70s film, but without the remake, would there even be a point to being on this planet? 80s! Wow, I wonder which one location Bruce Willis film is going to be called the best film, Killian. Sir, you don't know me. This is a pretentious, serious video. The 80s. The film decade of film decades. Considered by many to be the golden age of cinema and the worst age of cinema. And it's both, it really is both. If I ask you what the definitive 80s film is, you will get different answers. But if I ask you who the definitive 80s director is, Steven Spielberg and the 80s. Steven Spielberg has made more hits than like anyone ever. But even more impressive, the dude has 7 children. Keep it in your... He created the first blockbuster, Bruce Did Nothing Wrong. Realizing composer John Williams could make his film, he pretty much sat back and counted money. In the 80s, E.T. became the most successful movie of all time. Is that a gun in my kids movie? Please digitally alter it into a walkie-talkie. Then in 90s, he changed his mind and decided, I'm going to become a critically acclaimed director. Now he's all about pocket change. No one wants this. Please stop, Steven. Comedies were huge. There was a guy named Eddie Murphy. He was king. He also played a king. Ghostbusters was pretty good, but not as good as... The Yanks were obsessed with teen movies. Cheap to make, and you couldn't make TikToks or be nostalgic about Minecraft. There was nothing else for teens to do. And the teen comedies they made, all of them hold up. Some of them hold up. Ferris Bueller holds up. Did the Eurotrash make any teen comedies? There was one called Das Boot. One teen comedy is probably the closest we'll get to a definitive 80s movie. My friend Spielberg. I was just fired. Could you tell the studio I can make a movie about a kid who is friends with a nuclear scientist who doesn't age from the 50s to the 80s, but then the actor doesn't age for 30 years, so you're like, yeah, sure, okay, And like the incest stuff is very minimal. Why would you? The Back to the Future trilogy is bravely protected against reboots and remakes. It will be a sad day when the guardians of this dies. Alright, the Cantonese told me to check back in Hong Kong. Oh my god! It's masterpiece after masterpiece. Heroic bloodshed is the greatest film genre ever created. And it was profitable. Thanks to something called Betamax, and its super younger brother VHS. Making profit from garbage was no longer just for the studios. We got a lot of garbage in the 50s thanks to double features, but now we got garbage again, especially in the genre called the slasher genre. It was free money. Okay now, top 2 movies. Number 2, there was a film series named Rocky. It was alright, but the third entry was weak. Then, they made a film so good.
Imagine being able to build an app with your name on it, just by thinking about it. Meet Base 44, a complete AI creation platform. Describe what you want, and watch it take shape. You can plan, customize, and expand in any direction. From tools built for one, to platforms ready for many. From passion projects to enterprise-grade systems. Everything is built in and ready to launch. It's a new world of creation, where you can go as far as your imagination takes you. Can you imagine it? Let's make your dream a reality, right now.
I don't even remember what the first 2 were about. Number 1 is of course Fanny and Alexander, Bergman's swan song. It really takes the every frame of painting I did to its peak. Does it have problems? Sure, it's set in Sweden, all our tall buildings here. Also like the villain, I prefer villains like German villains, perhaps the eastern part of Germany, perhaps a cop main character. Okay, the 90s. When did the best 90s film come out? 9 months into the decade. Martin Scorsese in Goodfellas. Scorsese, what an unbelievable legacy. He's also short. Should I just say that and be done? Like, he's super important, so I can't, really? But I'm doing it. Martin Scorsese, everybody! A year later, a horror film sweeps the Academy Awards. Did I reach the 90s before talking about the Academy Awards? Yes. I was worried kids these days might not even have heard about it. Okay, second best 90s film, Stallone was tricked into a role in a film called Stop or My Mom Will Shoot You, which was awful. But then the next year, he was in like the best movie ever, Demolition Man. So he was fine. Holy, did they actually clone a T-Rex? It looks so real. Hey, it's my favorite Sam Jackson part, Arnold. He was also in Quentin Tarantino and a man worked in a video rental store. That's gonna be hard to explain to the kiddos. It was the TikTok of the 90s. Same amount of pedo. A guy named Quentin Tarantino realized his name belonged on a poster. He also loved shitty B-movies and said, I can make a shitty B-movie of quality. First a theater play, then Pulp Fiction. Instead of unrealistic dialogue, it had sexy unrealistic dialogue. What a revolution. Number 8 on IMDb. Number 2 and 3 on IMDb is the Godfather films. Okay, in the East, on Durban, it's Farewell My Concubine and of course Venom. But what's amazing is that the number 1 film on both sides of the world is the same. What makes the world love this film? It's probably because it does nothing wrong. The acting is good, the music is good, it's never boring, and it's inspiring to see Michael Jordan help the Toon Squad to come on and slam. And welcome to the jam! The definitive actor of this decade was a Canadian dude who made funny faces. But you know what's even more definitive than that? CG. And there was this one studio who only made CG. Steve Jobs and Pixar. Yes, the guy who invented this made Ratatouille. Steve single-handedly made a film about a lamp, and Disney was like, here's $30 million, make us gazillions. This was extremely revolutionary. So revolutionary, 2D animation is now illegal, unless it's a bad animated adult series. Eventually, he sold Pixar to Disney, and they immediately made Cars 2. They couldn't continue without him, but one man had an idea. If computer animation can make a pile of money, perhaps it can make 15 piles of money. James Cameron and Titanic. As a Canadian, he couldn't tell the difference between the American accent and Arnold's accent, accidentally turning him into a leading man. So they said, wanna make a sequel to this horror classic. He failed miserably and created an action masterpiece. Then he made a film to see if he could kill actors and get away with it. It failed. He read about a disaster that killed thousands of people and went, that's kinda romantic, and every girlfriend on the planet agreed. Then he made the most successful film ever, that had no cultural impact at all. But it was very cool to watch in the cinema. My friend watched it torrented, TS Cam, and till this day bullies me for enjoying it. Now let's talk about the next speed. 2000s. Also known as the Disney Empire era, but they finally had a real competitor called DreamWorks. So what's the best? Disney invented animation, made Lion King, the Hellfire song, and DreamWorks, well, DreamWorks made Gladiator, yes! Yes! Ridley Scott and Gladiator. So Ridley Scott became a recognized name after he invented the Alien franchise, that he would later destroy. The man's 83 and his career has no consistency at all. He'll make something revolutionary that inspires a generation one day, random schlock the next. But he also made Gladiator. Kids, if you haven't seen Gladiator, it's a film so good, it turned an historical accuracy into an accuracy. Where were we? Alright, DreamWorks. While Hercules is nice and Disney's best film is fun, nothing they have made will ever have the same cultural impact as Shrek. You might ask, why? I don't know. Smash Mouth maybe? Here comes the DVD. Costs nothing to make and everyone has a DVD player, also called a PS2. DVD stands for digital... Digital?
Alright, so listen up. State Farm was trying to charge me $197 for car insurance. No thank you. I got a friend who told me about this website Now I'm spending $58 a month. Full coverage. That's saving $139. It's amazing. All you do, you just go to the site, you put in some basic information, and you get all these options that show up. People start saving right away. All you have to do is just go check it out. It's that simple. The link's below.
Could you use up to $750? Find it at BioLife. Up to $750 is waiting for you. Just donate plasma, get paid for each donation the same day, then treat yourself and treat your friends. Schedule your appointment today.
So it's on the computer, on an internet. But things on an internet is free, and no one paid for film ever again. But before DVD died, there was a best DVD. You see, in 2001, a filmmaker decided to do something bold. A crazy idea that set a new standard. Michael Benjamin Bay and Pearl Harbor. We see early in Benjamin Bay's films a critique of the elite. In Armageddon, it's the drillers, the working man that saves everyone. In The Island, people are quite literally giving an arm and a leg for people they think they are. Now, a satirical film adaptation of the famous Steinbeck quote, "Truth is, it's unlikely this comes from a socialist standpoint, though." In the art house classic Transformers, there is a quote, "She's a criminal. Criminals are hot." More of a biblical idea of lust. So this would more fit the sin of greed. Extremely underrated indie director. The complete opposite of popcorn director Christopher Nolan. Nolan walked into his kitchen and couldn't remember why. So he made a movie about that. Someone saw it and said, "Yeah, you should make Batman." Without Jim Carrey. That's not real Batman. He made Inception, excellently parodied in that one Minecraft video. Everyone made fun of how overrated it was, because we expected it to reach a different status than it did. Like it only reached, hey, that's a solid film. Not legend. He's probably the most liked contemporary director, and all he does is walk around and hate on streaming services. What else was popular in the 2000s? Yes. Film is dead, it's all franchises. Harry Potter, Pirates of the Caribbean. I give up on you. Time to no longer be Hollywood-centric. Rest of the world, what you got? 안녕하세요, fighting! Killian, I bring you Old Boy. It's an intriguing revenge story about a man locked in a room for 15 years. Fun! Is it like based on something? Yes, the manga. Stop right there! I'm not watching your anime Netflix adaptation. Get the hell out of here. Hello? Ah, Brazil! No. What fun do you have for me? It's called City of God. It's a brutal portrayal of life in the slums. Does it have Carnival? It's set in Rio, but no. Next! Hello, I'm Hayao Miyazaki. Hello, bro. What? Bro. Yes? I brought Ice Age 2. Yes! If we look at Metacritic, they consider There Will Be Blood to be the best movie of the decade. Yeah, sure, fine. If you like, acting, cinematography, music and all that, then yes, of course it's the best film of the decade. But if you actually like good movies, Jason X, Jason in Space. Last decade, but it's kind of still the current decade. You were alive this time, what do you want me to tell you? Most important director, Jon Favreau. And chef. He was a B actor, then he made Elf. Then Jumanji 2. Then he made the greatest franchise empire ever seen in film. Then finally he made Chef. I actually like Marvel movies, sorta kinda while I'm eating. China now has the most cinemas in the world. Haven't really exploded on the world stage though. Perhaps their most famous film is Wolf Warrior 2. Anyone who insults China must die. That is the tagline. Studios have started to pander to China. It's worked once, and they'll keep doing it. In 2017, the women of Hollywood were kinda done. They didn't actually want to be seductive women, but were told they had to be, otherwise they wouldn't have a career. Also have fun in jail. One day in 2020, everyone decided to stop going to cinemas. But even before this, we were in a weird situation. It used to be actors sold movies. That's not a thing anymore, except for Ryan Reynolds. And that's about it. Robert was the main character in the biggest film in the world. Next film flopped. In the top 50 highest grossing films of the 2010s, only 3 are not remakes, franchise or sequels. Ew. Live action remakes. Do you wanna know who made the worst live-action remake? Yes, they're back, the French! So let's move on to the real question. Whatever happened to French people? Why aren't we casually watching French movies anymore? When my father was a kid, you would go to the cinema, and included in the ticket price you would get one candy box. That was the main snack. Eventually, popcorn showed up. You've probably heard of movie popcorn. Tasty, salty, buttery goodness. There's also caramel popcorn. It's not as good. The French just pop plain corn and use sugar instead of salt. So today it's impossible to watch a French film without thinking of the torture the French moviegoers would have to go through. Sometimes you can get both at the cinema. Again, with the myth-making. And then comes the big question. How can they endure this? Do French people not have taste? And that's when it clicked. They brag so much about their food, right? It's just a cover for the ultimate French myth. It wasn't short, they didn't run out of the cinema, and we have taste buds. We totally have taste buds. That's why French food is the best. That's why we work so hard on our food, because we totally have taste buds. And that is the Kilian experience. Oh wow, you actually watched the entire thing. Please like and comment. I had a plan. Oh, I'm gonna make a history of video games next year. No, not a chance. This killed me. I am dead. I'm becoming a video game channel again. I don't want to do this. I'm tired. Anyways, happy Halloween, Thanksgiving, Latvian Independence Day, Christmas, and New Year's. And holidays.
Monday.com, the opposite of any work platform we tried in the past. We tried other work management platforms, not naming names.
Welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Eric Vox, and this is a breakdown of Rick and Morty Season 8, the entire season, from Zack Snyder and James Gunn cameos to the return of Wubba-Dub-Dub. We are breaking down all the Easter eggs, hidden details, and callbacks to previous episodes that you might have missed. Thanks for your patience on this one, and if you can, we would love it if you checked out our merch store, nerdright.shop, where we have all kinds of really cool nerdy designs. Like, I'm wearing this interesting Wayland Yutani loader design, and I love this shirt, and I'm wearing it all the time. Grabbing one of these is just a great way you can support Unlike the other Ricks, but the head cloning scientist from the Citadel. He makes a super buff kaiju giant Morty clone that destroys the Rick clones in the Citadel and redeems himself by freeing the Mortys and sending them back to the asteroid in his ship before he gets taken out. Arcade Morty works to find the Morty clones' new planets so they can start making their own memories. Straw Morty gets to go to a planet with a huge wheat field. Cow Skull Morty goes to a cow planet. Middle-aged Morty goes to a casino planet. And Miner Morty goes to a mining planet. Arcade Morty goes back to the asteroid to live by himself. And Main Rick and Morty portal back to find Morty's lost fidget spinner from the start of the episode. In the episode tag, the sentient gambling dice that the Rick clone used for gambling purposes emerge from the wreckage of the Citadel and start fighting each other. Season 8, Episode 4, The Last Temptation of Jerry. This title is an obvious play on The Last Temptation of Christ, the controversial 1988 Martin Scorsese film starring Willem Dafoe as Jesus. This episode has a ton of literal Easter eggs hidden throughout because it's an Easter episode. It's Easter, and Jerry is super into the holiday, but the rest of the family, not so much. Jerry goes for a drive, and there are some Easter eggs hidden by the side of the road. He hits and kills the Easter Bunny, and Rick tells him it's Tim Allen's and Santa Claus rules, so Jerry is now turning into the new Easter Bunny. Rick scans the dead bunny's necklace. It's 13th century German, and the scanner shows it's an image of people offering an Easter egg to a religious figure. Rick says he and Morty are gonna Dan Brown that necklace, a reference to the author Dan Brown's thriller mystery novels, most famously The Da Vinci Code. He throws in even more pop culture film references when he tells Morty, let's Indiana Jones this. And just like in Indiana Jones, a large map pops up and they travel by map, although they use a portal to go straight from one location to another. Before he left, Rick encased Jerry in a mitogen deterrent to slow the transformation. He tasks Beth with watching over Jerry and tells Summer to go enjoy her spring break trip in Daytona.
Here's a fake ID and a second alcohol stomach. I want you to do some Molly and throw up in a pool.
No, I love you, Grandpa.
Come on, Morty, to the Alps!
There are more Easter eggs hidden behind rocks. Some permafrost has melted and the Easter Bunny broke free. Rick says,
God, I do not want to say climate change on this show. I don't know which way Zaslav voted.
Okay, so David Zaslav is the current CEO of Warner Brothers Discovery, which owns Adult Swim and Rick and Morty. Since Trump's election in 2024, David Zaslav has been pretty chummy with the president and given many interviews implying Trump is good for his business. Rick and Morty walk into a German town and there are more Easter eggs hidden here on one of the roofs and the windowsills. Morty says, look at this Wicker Man looking place, because the residents burn sticks and straw in the shape of bunnies. Just before this, Rick made a reference to the movies Iceman and Encino Man, and Morty called him old, even though arguably, if we're going with
2025 IRS tax forgiveness now has open enrollment. It's easy to qualify. Get up to 99% of tax debt forgiven. It's time for a fresh start. Click below and qualify today.
I have never seen a better example of a subverted expectation than in Rian Johnson's Knives Out. Like seriously, if you want to shock your audience and do it right, where it's not just a cheap trick, but instead it's something that improves the whole story, there truly is no better case study than Knives Out. But hold on a minute, this makes no sense, right? Because Rian Johnson's last film was The Last Jedi, a film overwhelmingly criticised for the fact that it subverted people's expectations. What? Clearly something's amiss here. The truth is, the story behind Knives Out fascinates me. But it wasn't the plot, although that was great. Rather, it's what happened behind the scenes. Because it's a rare day when we have such a crystal clear example of a director using a device in one work and failing to use it correctly, then they learn their mistake and bring that forward and use that exact same device to achieve an outstanding result in their very next work. In short, this video looking at Knives Out isn't just about how to do a plot twist and subvert expectations correctly, it's also about the redemption of Rian Johnson and how he learned a valuable lesson about how to do a subversion, one I can't wait to share with you all today. But before we talk Knives Out, we need to address the elephant in the room. The Last Jedi was, how should I put it, a slightly divisive film.
I would be worried if everybody across the board was like, yeah, that was a good movie. It's much more exciting to me when you get, a group of people who are like, literally saying it was the worst movie I've ever seen. Having those two extremes to me is, the type of movie that I want to make.
Come on the top!
And with The Last Jedi, Rian Johnson was clearly making an intentional effort to be divisive. And what's worth saying is when it comes to fiction, there are very, very few things that are inherently bad, and that includes being divisive. But how is it okay to tell a polarizing story? Well, I think a great example would be stories that cover highly controversial subjects. For example, American History X. A lot of people hated that film because it explored such a taboo topic as it did, although I won't say what that topic is because I'll get hit by the demonetization hammer if I just say that one word. But I think the biggest error in Johnson's intentions in being divisive with Star Wars wasn't that in itself, but it's because he went about it in all the wrong ways. He wasn't divisive because he raised valid and interesting questions that some people just prefer not to be raised. It's instead because he achieved his goal of division by compromising fundamental aspects of his story for a quick, short-term cash-in of shock. He achieved his desired polarity by intentionally incorrectly using storytelling devices and decreasing the quality of his work, or as everyone called it back then, subverting expectations. But how the hell does Knives Out relate to this? Well, in short, the Rian Johnson who made The Last Jedi is not the same one who made Knives Out, because he's clearly learned a valuable lesson since then, and it's something he really should be commended on. And what I think that lesson was, is that a subversion done right doesn't just not reduce the quality of your story, it instead enhances it. And really, I think Johnson realised that there are three core rules that decide whether or not your subversion of expectation will be an asset to your story or a detriment. And the first rule to making any form of subversion, shock or twist in your story good is it must enhance your story going forward. Secondly, it must have a strong verisimilitude with the story's logic that's come before. And thirdly, this is the big one, this is the main reason why The Last Jedi's twists and turns just didn't work. It has to be in keeping with all the promises that you've made so far to your audience. And what you'll see once we've broken all of these three down is how The Last Jedi breaks all of these rules and Knives Out passes all three with flying colours. So firstly, how is it possible for a subversion of expectation to enhance your story? It's easy to say, well, it should just enhance your story, but how does a good subversion
Hard launching for the summer, the Tito's Handmade Vodka Summer Variety Pack. It's a box of cups. Fill those bad boys with whatever you want. For a limited time only.
Chili do that? Well, the main subversion of Knives Out is the fact that it flips genres a third of the way through. The entire advertising campaign of this movie, and also the whole first act, is all about this movie being a whodunit. They are trying to find Harlan Thrombey's killer, but then at the end of the first act we have a flashback that tells us exactly who did it and seemingly answers all of the questions. All of a sudden, with the flip of a coin, this is no longer a whodunit, it's a how the hell is she gonna get away with it. And what I loved so goddamn much about this twist is how wonderfully it serves the story going forward. Jesus Christ, I love this. Rian Johnson, I actually love you for this. If you're watching this and we ever just happen to meet up one day, I promise I will buy you 10 rounds of drinks because of just how genius what you've done here was. But the reason why this subversion is so good is because Johnson weaponizes the tropes of the genre. Because now the tropes of the murder mystery genre are themselves the antagonists. Because of the flashback, the audience believes that Marta poisoned Thrombey by accident, and so far, Marta's been a thoroughly kind and likeable person, and because of that, we're rooting for her to succeed. But in every murder mystery, the detective always catches the killer. always, at the end of every murder mystery, the detective stands around all the suspects, has a monologue where they go through all the clues, and then he points at the person who did the deed, and then they get caught. It's just a trope that every murder mystery has. And on a meta level, not just by looking at this film itself, but rather the context of our culture, we're now even more invested in the story because Johnson, as a result of subverting the genre, exploits those tropes to make the audience truly believe that the detective will find her out by the end of the story, and she will go to jail. And these subverted tropes, combined with how much the audience is rooting for her to get away with it, to create some really, really compelling engagement. Like, I'm sorry, I very rarely use naughty words on this channel, but I'll make an exception just once. This is fucking genius. Like, I cannot get across how goddamn, clever this is. Like, this is the first time I've ever seen a story exploit and weaponize its own tropes by subverting them in this way. Like, I'm just... God, I love this movie. Like, seriously, this genre twist in Knives Out is one of the best subversions I've seen. Maybe even the best I've ever seen, because it isn't just a lazy subversion like in The Last Jedi, where it's purely for the shock. Instead, it does an outstanding job at raising the stakes and increasing audience investment going forwards. What Knives Out demonstrates really quite well is that Rian Johnson has the best mentality when it comes to being a writer-director. Like, the film proves that he's striving to improve himself so he can tell better stories. And if you're a writer, you should always be on the lookout for more resources to learn from so you can improve your craft. And when it comes to a great place where you can find no end of material to learn from, Audible has a trove of interesting audiobooks that I personally learned a ton from, and I can happily thank Audible for sponsoring today's video. A while ago, I recommended you guys check out the audiobook for Save the Cat by Blake Snyder, because it's full of some really good tips for writing screenplays, and it especially helps if you're having plotting issues. But recently, I've been listening to Save the Cat I'd recommend you get Save the Cat Writes a Novel, because it's slightly longer and has got slightly more actionable advice for you. Like, this audiobook is free. Like, you can listen to it immediately, and all you have to do to collect it is click my link in the description, that's audible.com/closer look, or text closer look to 500 500 and get your free audiobook today. So anyway, back to the video. As for rule 2, the subversion must have a strong verisimilitude with the story told before. I didn't know that this word existed when I made my Skyrim video a few months back, but now I do. Please, please forgive me. Jesus Christ, you guys really did not forgive me for that one in the comments. But essentially, verisimilitude means that a thing makes perfect logical sense in light of all the other logic that surrounds it. Now, you may think that, well, all that means when it comes to twists in a story is foreshadowing. And in some subversions, like your traditional plot twists, that can be totally true. But it isn't always. Here's a great example of how foreshadowing isn't everything. Instead, verisimilitude is. The infamous scene from The Last Jedi where Rey gives Luke his old lightsaber and then he throws it over the cliff. The reason why this subversion just doesn't work is because it completely goes against Luke's character and what he would actually do in this scenario. Like, this lightsaber was created by his father. For the longest time, it was his mentor's. For the longest time, it was his. Even if he's denounced being a Jedi and has become a cynic, this weapon would still be of incredible sentimental value to him. And it is a family heirloom, the only heirloom that Luke has. And the fact that he casually throws it away without a second's thought, like it's a used tissue paper, totally goes against his character. In this case, it's an issue of verisimilitude as to why this subversion just doesn't work, not foreshadowing. This also cuts the other way, because if you have a twist that's got really bugger all foreshadowing, but it's got a really great verisimilitude where it's totally in line with your story's logic, it makes that twist so much more likely to be a good one, and it makes it far easier for your audience to swallow that twist. A great example would be Ned Stark's death in Game of Thrones. This is why I'm saying your shock, twist, or subversion needs verisimilitude, and not necessarily foreshadowing, because Ned Stark's death is a great twist, and it's got basically no foreshadowing. With this scene, everyone who hadn't read the books beforehand expected Ned's life to be spared, then for him to go on and join Jon in the Night's Watch. Okay, look, it's been a while since I saw the show, so maybe I'm wrong, I'm sorry if I am, but I can't remember this moment having any foreshadowing in the show. But when Joffrey says,
Sir Ilyn, bring me his head.
It's incredibly shocking, but it also totally works because it makes perfect sense. Like, yes, by killing Ned Stark, Joffrey will start a war. He will create massive friction with his relations to the north, and it's a move that any wise, level-headed king would never do, but that's not who Joffrey is. He's a naive child who totally lacks any wisdom, and to top it all off, he's an impulsive twat who loves hurting people and ruining diplomatic relations and starting a war that will kill thousands of his own people and make his life considerably harder going forwards for no other reason than the pleasure of pleasing the mob, and seeing Ned die is completely in line with what Joffrey would have done if this story were real. As a result, it's a twist that works wonderfully, despite the fact that it has basically no foreshadowing. And okay, if we're making a video called How to Do a Plot Twist, we can't really do that title justice without covering foreshadowing, and in my opinion, the most cathartic kinds of plot twists are the ones where the clues are there, where it's possible for the audience to figure the twist out, but where the clues are so deftly placed that the audience only realises that they were in fact clues after the twist is revealed. Now, obviously, you can have a great twist that isn't this. Like, it's possible for someone to see your twist coming and still love it when it happens. But if you don't land in what I'd call like the plot twist sweet spot, where like the twist is extremely obvious in hindsight but not at all beforehand, then your plot might be criticised as being hackneyed because it's too easy to predict, or alternatively, it's nonsensical because it wasn't remotely possible to predict that twist beforehand, because you laid a poor groundwork for it. But a great example of foreshadowing done well in Knives Out is how Ransom is revealed to be the real killer behind it all. It turns out that he swapped Harlan's medication to trick Marta into giving him a lethal morphine dose. But what I love so much about this twist is how it lands so well in that sweet spot that we just talked about, where it's damn near impossible to figure it out beforehand, but extremely obvious in hindsight. And what I think's really interesting on how Johnson does this twist is how he uses a specific approach to foreshadowing that I absolutely adore. It's by carefully choosing the order in which we're fed the clues. And this is something that I think's wildly underestimated, because when people talk about plot twists, they often don't mention that the order in which you deliver the clues has a massive effect on how easy to guess the twist is, but it has basically zero effect on how cathartic that twist is when it happens. Okay, so the very first clue we get that Ransom is the murderer is right at the very start when Blank is interviewing the family, and we're told that at 3 o'clock in the morning, once everyone is in bed, the dog started barking, and we absorb this information. We have no idea what to make of it, so we just remember it and nothing more. But now, going forward, Johnson gives us the hints that help us piece together exactly how important that main clue was. Because throughout the entire film, the dogs are friendly to everyone they meet. Like, when Marta sneaks up in the night just after 12, they're friendly with her and don't make a sound. When Thromby's daughter arrives, they sprint towards her enthused. Like, at one point, one of them even plays fetch with Detective Blanc. Like, the only time in the whole movie where we see the dogs worked up is when Ransom first arrives and they harass him and bark loudly. Like, at one point, Blanc even says this:
"Best judge of character is a dog."
Shop the super sale at Sherwin-Williams and transform your space with color. Get 40% off paints and stains with sale prices starting at $29.39. Hurry in.
Here, Johnson has told us that Ransom is the murderer. He's confessed it, we just don't realise it yet. Now, this may sound odd, but trust me, it's totally true. If you're going for a plot twist, one of the best ways to do it is exactly how Johnson does it in Knives Out, and give the main foreshadowed clue first, and then slowly between then and when the plot twist happens, you drip feed in the hints and the information that allows the audience to make that connection. And even though Johnson does this rather cheeky approach to foreshadowing, when the finger of blame is finally pointed at Ransom, it's cathartic, not because we realise it's Ransom, but because we finally realise it could have only been Ransom, and the boot doesn't fit any other foot than his. And finally, let's talk about promises. I think this is the main issue most people had with The Last Jedi. We were promised certain things, and those promises were totally broken. Rey's parentage is a great example of this. So, J.J. Abrams, when he made The Force Awakens, essentially said, "Hey, we don't know who Rey's parents are, but I promise it's got a very interesting answer. Ooh, I wonder what's in this mystery box. Ooh, it's going to be a big reveal later on down the line." And even though J.J. Abrams had no idea what the answer to that mystery even was, it still did a pretty damn good job at getting people hyped for this plotline, for this mystery thread that was going to take place in the other films. Like, lots of people were speculating. Like, this promise people were interested in seeing it delivered on. And then, of course, we have the moment where Kylo Ren just says, you remember that incredibly fun mystery that everyone was excited to see resolved? Yeah, the answer's mundane. Yeah, the answer's just boring. Your parents were nobodies. Like, when Johnson did that, it achieved nothing. Absolutely nothing except disappointment, because it broke a promise made for a thoroughly pointless reason. And what I think is brilliant about Knives Out is how Johnson's clearly learned from this mistake, and he's realised just how important it is to keep your promises. And what he does that's really cheeky in Knives Out is he lets you think that he's broken his promises, but then subverts that and says, oh, just kidding, here's the answer that you all wanted. And it's this very, very, fun climax. But what is really good about the plot of Knives Out is how we have that murder mystery plot, and then it just fizzles out, goes away. Now we have this entirely new plot of Marta trying to get away with it. And this is the best bit, because not just that plot we're invested in is resolved in the end, but the murder mystery plot that we all thought was just dead and buried, a promise that Johnson let us all think was broken when the movie changed genres, is resurrected. And now that second plot of her getting away with it recombines with the initial murder mystery plot as we realise that there's another malicious actor at play. And in the end, every single promise made and all these two plot lines, they collide seamlessly to result in a thoroughly cathartic climax when finally we realise it was Ransom who did it all, and then he gets taken away. And it's just such a satisfying climax when it happens. I am truly envious to my core of Johnson's achievements with Knives Out, because I couldn't even dream of writing a plot even half as perfect as this one. Anyway, thanks for watching. Please don't forget to click my link in the description to check out that free audiobook, and I'll see you guys next time on The Closer Look.
When it's time to upgrade, all I gotta do is call up the sisters. Hey! What's up?
Sinners is a masterclass in how to write intelligent horror. And I'll tell you what, there was a moment I became sold on Sinners and knew I was in for something special. I was half braced for Mary to die because she wants to get it on with Stack, as is the case in a lot of horror where the first character dies pretty much just because they're promiscuous. And it's always a girl too, for some reason, but we didn't get that. Instead, she goes out to the vampires claiming she wants to see if they have money to spend. Only Remick sees right through her, saying she came for a different reason entirely.
Because you're in some deep, deep pain that money can't fix. You came over here for fellowship and love.
Fellowship and love.
She feels the lack of a people that she can identify with, so goes out to the vampires in the naive hope that she might find them there. It's such an interesting mistake to lead to a character's death. It underlines the story's entire theme, and my god, wow, what a way to do it. I am in awe. And to see it from another angle, take a moment that conventionally might be called bad due to it being an out-of-nowhere jump scare, only it works really well.
My son has felt the call of sin.
It works because this prologue is from after the climax, and his father is reminding him of Remick, the baddie. When he looks at his dad, he is seeing the big bad vampire because they both want the same thing from him, to cast away his cultural roots. And this flash of a scare primes the audience for Sammy's internal struggle as well as the theme. It's the opposite of cheap, and it's so refreshing to see a horror that's actually thoughtful with how it scares the audience. This is really the core of the film, the main reason why I'd call this an intelligent horror, because while you'd think the Smokestack twins are the protagonists, it's really Sammy. Every other character moves around him as their own unique cog in this sublimely written machine. He's why the vampires came.
You're the one I came for. I sensed you. I want to see my people again. I'm trapped here. But your gifts can bring him to me.
Sammy's struggle underpins everything the movie is out to say. His gift with music means he can help his people connect with their culture. Meanwhile, a whole bunch of characters are pushing him to give all of that up. This comes from Remick, but also his allies.
Well, you better enjoy the rest of the night, because this your last juke. Drop the guitar, Samuel. Put it down. In the name of God.
His father is a preacher, a Christian, and Christianity isn't a part of his heritage. It's something that was forced upon his people after their culture was assimilated by the West. His father didn't just choose assimilation, he chose to leap in head first and convert his community into believing the same thing he does. Only Sammy's conflicted, because preaching doesn't really move him. In fact, the only time he's ever touched the divine is when he's playing the blues. And why is that?
Blues.
wasn't forced on us like that religion. No, sir. We brought this with us, Mahone.
In fact, every major character has a stance here. They land on either side of choosing to preserve one's culture or assimilate into the more dominant one invading their lives. Sammy is stuck right in the middle of this. The story's big question, when you strip all else away, is which side of the theme will Sammy end up on? Everything I've laid out is already really clever. It's hard to find a horror film thinking about things with this level of depth. But the more we peel back the layers here, the more you see how this permeates through the minutiae of the story, you'll see just how genius this writing is. Take Annie. Out of everyone in the production, she's the most in tune with her heritage. No one is a bigger believer in sticking with one's culture than her. It is no coincidence that she's the first to realise what their weaknesses are by throwing the pickled garlic. It's her who recognises the true nature of the threat.
These ain't hanks. They're vampires.
The more
Co-pilot, Banana almost got me in my dream this time.
It might mean you're feeling pursued by a responsive...
The more in tune with your roots you are, the better you are at noticing when they're under attack. It makes intuitive sense. And take the climax. She gets bitten and asks Smoke to put a stake in her heart. She is the only character to normally die during the vampire threat, choosing death over assimilation. Her convictions on the theme are that strong.
That's what I'm talking about!
It's brilliant writing. Then take Smoke and Stack. They both believe the opposite here. Stack is totally okay with embracing culture that isn't his. Smoke isn't. When the vampires start their first song, Stack is bobbing his little head and he's having a great time, while Smoke is unimpressed and threatens them with his gun. After Smoke scares them off, Stack says,
"Y'all have a nice night."
Stack, when he tries to tempt Slim, uses foreign goods to do it.
What you got there, boy? What is? It's an Irish beer.
Smoke's love interest, meanwhile, is Annie, the one most in touch with their culture, the only person who dies and doesn't end up a vampire. Stack's love interest is Mary, the one least in touch with their culture and the first to become a vampire.
It was perfect. Perfect.
And of course, let's look at Mary. She's got black heritage, but she's mostly white, and while most of the characters are accommodating to her, there's this undercurrent that she doesn't really fit in. She lacks the same roots as everybody else. She hasn't integrated with any culture, not black or white, making her especially easy prey to the vampires. Like, even the Choctaw, they're only on screen for a bit, but them being competent vampire hunters who have Remick on the run when we first see him isn't coincidental. These guys have recognised Remick as the monster he is, and have totally rejected him, letting us guess at their stance on the theme, one of total non-integration.
He's not what he seems. God forbid you let him into your home.
This clicks well with the setting because this was in the middle of the residential school era when native resistance saw a massive resurgence due to how children were being taken away by the government. But before I break it down further, I reckon there is a fundamental reason why Sinners is so good while a lot of horror out there isn't. The core of it is because 80% of what makes for a great horror story is just what makes any great story. Deep characters, rich themes, an exciting plot. That remaining 20%, well, that's whether or not it scares the audience properly. And I say 80%, it's that high because often a horror story is labelled as one, but it isn't really that scary. However, because it's still a well-told story, people will love it. As a great example, Sinners. It's definitely a horror, but there aren't that many moments in it that shake you to your core with fright. Then you've got Aliens, another great one. It was nowhere near as scary as that first film, but because the characters are so good, the action is so fun, the plot's so tight, few cared about the relative lack of scares. For many people, they prefer it to the original film. Now, I'm not saying horror shouldn't be scary, obviously. Being scary is a virtue here, but writers have gotten so focused on that 20%, asking how do we scare the audience, that they neglect every other aspect of the story. If you ask me, this is the real root of the rot in recent horror. A great example is The Nun 2. If you've never heard of it, that's fair. It came out 2 years ago and, like most horror films, is immediately forgotten about because there's little special about it. But in the film, they have some good scares there, to be fair. There's one where magazines are turning in the wind and the figure of an evil nun gradually falls before grabbing her. It's top stuff, very creative, but the fact these little moments are the only parts of this film anyone can remember betrays the reason for its mediocrity. These scares are where all of the focus went into, so they're the only things good about the film. But then take Sinners. We got a good few scares in here, but they all have substance. This scare does a ton for the story. So, Cornbread walked off to use the toilet ages ago. Everything went to hell, and he's finally come back a suspiciously long time later.
Where the hell you been at, man?
Then he asks to come in.
Alright, well let me in so I can help.
But they don't say yes, so he asks a second time.
Just step aside and let me on in now.
And that gets them very suspicious. Why does he need to be invited in? Then the tensions ratchet up until he's told to sod off. He demands they at least pay him for the night's work. They do, and that's when we get our scare. This isn't some solitary fright, it's actually integral to the story structure. It comes at a point usually called fun and games, where they test out the rules of the world and learn the true nature of what they're facing. This whole scene tells the characters that the vampires can convincingly act as the people they once were, and also the important rule that vampires have to be invited in. But most of all, it's the kick in the arse the characters need, telling them it's time to prepare for a big fight. It marks a key progression point in the film. What The Nun 2 and others of its ilk did, it's a writing mistake I like to call the flaw of moment to moment. It's a common writing mistake in general, but it has utterly plagued recent horror. I've fallen for it before, so has my fellow creator Nerdwriter. In fact, in a video of his, he put it quite beautifully.
Most of the student films I directed revolved around a few moments that I thought were going to blow people away. If I could just navigate the story there, that would be enough. The moment would do all the work. Then I'd just navigate to the next one. For this reason, my student films weren't that good.
But there's a great question people have been asking. Why is Remick Irish? It's a really interesting choice, and even more interesting, why does he speak with an American accent?
Can't we just, for one night, just all be family?
Only to reveal his Irishness alongside his vampirism. It's because the Irish at the time were looked down upon as the dregs of society, second-class citizens. There's a reason Remick has an American accent even deep into the climax when there's no point putting up a front anymore, because he's assimilated into the American culture and has lost touch with his own roots. The Irish at the time evaded their persecution in the US by, in a sense, doing exactly what Remick did and advocates for: erase your identity and assimilate. Vampirism is an allegory for assimilating culture. It reflects the cold truth how once you become a vampire, you don't need to worry about being hunted because you've joined the group that's oppressing you. This is all playing into setting too, and why choosing the right one is so often underrated. Many writers get lazy with it here. The cabin in the woods or haunted house tropes are perfect examples. I've yet to see a story where it's a cabin in the woods, and that setting is anything other than a justification for plot to happen because it's isolated and they can't reach the police. The setting should be bolstering every aspect of the story, not just plot. Remick being Irish, that aspect of history at the time, clicks so well with the theme, as does the general setting, the Jim Crow South. That core thematic divide, it's not just permeating the plot and the characters, but the setting too, that of a segregated town still living under the shadow of slavery through sharecropping. These are a displaced people, one struggling to put down cultural roots without having those roots be tainted by the loom of Western culture, such as Christianity. It's the perfect setting for this story. And a moment that's just so good is the very climax. A power tip: the way your hero defeats the villain should underpin the theme. Remick's coming after Sammy, and Sammy starts praying. Christianity's great at protecting from monsters. It helps with exorcisms and usually stops vampires in their tracks, but in this story, it makes him happy. He joins in with the prayer.
Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses. Long ago, The man who stole my father's land forced these words upon us. I hated those men, but the words still bring me comfort.
This is all subverting the normal vampire formula, but it works because Christianity is something that he assimilated himself. It's the main religion of the dominant culture that's been seeping into this town. It's essentially everything that Remick stands for. Sammy saying the Lord's Prayer to protect from Remick is a sign that he hasn't truly completed his arc. It didn't work, so what does Sammy do next? He reaches for his guitar, a symbol of his culture, and smacks Remick with it, and it burns him terribly, buying him the time he needs for Smoke to come save the day, because it's got silver in it. Now that is some damn fine symbolism. Sinners is a story firing on all cylinders all the way through. I've yet to see another horror film like it, one that's so diligent with how it handles its ideas. If there had to be a big lesson to learn here, it's that you shouldn't make the mistake of thinking of your characters as one thing, your themes as another, and your setting as the other. All of these elements in a great story, they should be blending together. So much so, it annoys any potential video essayists trying to divide it all into neat sections for their video, because it's all so seamless. So I've been inactive on The Closer Look for 5 months now, and there's a reason why. I've been working on the coolest video I have ever made, and it's called How to Write a Psychopath. I noticed that while everyone and their mum is making how to write dialogue, top 10 tips for character arcs videos that more or less all blend together, nobody is doing topic deep dives on the really hard to write issues that require a ton of research to get right, like PTSD, autism, psychopathy, largely because the effort required is enormous. These are all topics I'm going to tackle for you guys, and the amount of scientific papers I had to read to make that psychopath one made me a bit crazy, but it's finally done. In it, I break down why Hannibal Lecter is actually incredibly unrealistic. Someone like him has never existed. While Willy Wonka is actually a textbook psychopath, it's scary how well he fits the diagnosis. I have never been more proud of a video, I've never put more effort into a video, and while it's ready for you to watch, it's not on YouTube yet. Instead, it's out early on Nebula. I'm doing something special with Nebula from now on. I will always be one video ahead there. You're going to have to wait a while for the Psychopath video to come out, because after it is another mega video called Hollywood Can't Write Genius Characters, where I break down the many, many ways.
Earn a 30-cent Hy-Vee fuel saver for every $60 this Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. That's a 30-cent fuel saver for
Homelander is the most terrifying villain I've ever seen. Every time he's on screen in The Boys, the tension is unbearable, and the audience can't help but dread what he'll do next. There is something really special going on under the hood of Homelander's character that gives him a major edge over characters like Joker and Darth Vader, and today we'll be exploring what that is, as well as tackling the question of how do you actually write a terrifying villain. Well, firstly, I like to think there are two kinds of hero-villain conflict. One where the power levels are pretty close, and the other where the power levels are vastly different. Take, for example, when Captain America fights Bucky in The Winter Soldier. In this fight, they're very similarly skilled, and yes, there's a compelling struggle as to who will win, but it's when there is a true power imbalance. When Darth Vader ignites his lightsaber and stares down the terrified rebels. When Homelander confronts, pretty much any other character in The Boys, or when Omni-Man fights Invincible, or in a less combat-oriented kind of conflict, when Hans Lander, the German colonel, stares down the powerless French farmer. Generally, these kinds of confrontations have way more suspense than the former. Hans Lander is a considerably more terrifying villain than the Winter Soldier in their respective scenes, because the relative power difference is so much greater. But when we have Iron Man and Captain America duking it out, we're on the edge of our...
Hey, yo, man. As soon as we take this shit, we're gonna contact Mr. Beast. Like, we got this shit for 20 mil, nigga. I know Mr. Beast gonna want that shit. Yo, man. Dog. Like I said, I don't care. I don't care if lives have to get transitioned. I don't care. They're not my friends. I don't give a fuck about these Project Zoe piece, I know there's a fucking geek out there that give me $1 million for that. The fucking, that Red Dark Magician shit, dog. They said they got all these, okay, first of all, in PlayStation games, to have the original Grand Theft Auto in clean condition, you don't think someone's gonna spend mad bands on that shit? Oh my god, yeah, man. I know I'm gonna do. Let me set the house on fire. Like. This nigga's trying to commit crimes.
Seats asking who will win this fight. But when Homelander is furious at a character we care about, we don't ask who's going to win the fight. The power differential is so insane that we know there won't even be a fight. We instead ask, what will the villain choose to do, knowing that what they choose to do is exactly what is going to happen. When you have a villain just as powerful as your hero, that can work great for your story, and don't get me wrong, it can be quite scary what's going to happen. But when you have a villain be quite a bit more powerful, now things are getting scary. We're genuinely fearful the villain will win, such as Iron Man fighting Thanos. But it's when the villain is ridiculously more powerful than the hero, that is when they become truly terrifying. As the idea that the villain will get everything they want, that the main characters may die, it feels more than just credible, but probable. And again, don't perceive power to be too literal here. Yes, it can be in the terms of having laser eyes or being a super soldier, but it can also take any other form of power. Perhaps a boss who can fire their employee and ruin their life. You can even pull this off in a toxic relationship where the manipulative character has complete control over the other's finances, giving them total power over them. One thing's for sure though, if your villain has less power than your hero, you're going to have a very hard time making them a scary one. There's a reason why you almost never see stories do this, because how can we fear what the villain will do when the hero can stop them with total ease? But then again, One Punch Man does exist, so even if you do go against this rule, you still can tell a great story. But while a power differential really does grease the wheels in terms of making them terrifying, it's not everything. It's only one piece of a larger picture. I mean, when you see Homelander in a scene with literally anyone else, we feel dread around what he'll do. But then you compare that to Thanos, someone who's also ridiculously powerful, and there are quite a few scenes where he isn't really that scary. For example, when he chats with Gamora about his plans in Infinity War. Both of these heroes are arguably the most powerful person in their respective universes. But why is that scene just not very suspenseful when Homelanders routinely are in The Boys? Clearly, power isn't everything here, and I reckon what's missing is that Thanos is not like Joker or Vader or Homelander. His personality is what matters here, not just because he loves Gamora, but because he isn't the sort to kill someone without a strong reason. For someone who's seeking to kill trillions of people, he will only do evil in the name of what he perceives to be the greater good.
Minute Maid can't fix a wonky tot, but it can sweeten the sting. At least there's that. Minute Maid is just a juice at the end of the day, but we can help make things a little more okay.
Only if he deems it absolutely necessary. You could go up to Thanos and punch him straight in the face if you wanted. If your death does nothing to help him achieve his end goals, he can actually be relied upon most of the time to spare you. Thanos, despite his incredible power level, is not as inherently scary as other villains we know and love, because he needs to have his motivations be properly set up in each scene, otherwise we won't be terrified by him. But compare that Gamora scene to the others where he confronts Star-Lord or Doctor Strange, and now suddenly those scenes are filled with suspense. Thanos is now incredibly terrifying because he's hitting all the criteria. The power differential is huge, and crucially, these guys are in the way of his end goal, so he's got his motivation to do harm established, which introduces the prospect that something terrible will probably happen to our characters. Villains like these can go down incredibly well, but even if your villain is powerful and has the motivation to inflict harm, that's still barely scratching the surface of what makes a villain a scary one. And I want to recommend something to you guys, because this week I've been reading Bird by Bird by Anne Lamott, and I've gotten a lot out of it. It's a lot like Stephen King's On Writing, less so craft, more so the best ways you can conduct yourself and be the best writer you can be. It's one of the best-selling writing craft books of all time for a reason, and personally I listen to the incredibly well-performed audiobook. And if you want to do so too, you can actually do that for free thanks to Audible, the sponsor of today's video. What I love so much about Audible is how without it, I wouldn't be able to read. I'm having less and less time on my hands these days between the closer look and writing all my novels behind the scenes. So like having Audible, it's unbelievably useful because now I get to read when I just otherwise couldn't, as I listen while going to the gym, playing games, cooking dinner and generally doing all the boring stuff I was gonna do anyway. And if you click my link in the description or text closer look to 500, you'll get a free credit good for any audiobook you like on their site. And Bird by Bird is a fantastic one for you to get if you're a writer. So please, if you want to join me in using Audible, do click my link in the description or text closer look to 500. But back to it, if you want to create a villain who's reliably terrifying like Homelander, well all they have to do is be on screen, and that's enough to get the audience racked with anxiety. Another great thing is to give them a history of evil. All too often you'll have a villain who may tick off all of the previous things, like having power and having a good motivation, but even then they're not too terrifying, because they've never really done anything terribly evil before. A lot of kids' cartoons have this problem, where it's a villain may be incredibly powerful and will have great motivation to do something evil, but it's incredibly hard to be terrified by them, because they've never actually done anything like terribly bad. But then you compare that to, say, The Silence of the Lambs, where we see a Hannibal Lecter, and yes, the performance is terrifying and it's a very well written script, but what makes Hannibal so much more terrifying is the knowledge of the despicable, repugnant things he's done of put him into this high security prison. When a villain has a history, a context of doing horribly evil things, it gives them a certain credibility, which makes the audience more inclined to believe that they may do something truly horrible to our characters. Homelander, again, ticks all of these off with flying colours. He's made all the more terrifying by the context around him, by the despicable things he's done, like killing a gunman who's already surrendered to him, by allowing a whole plane full of people to die, by burning the brains out of the woman he supposedly loved. And God, I'm going to have to be so careful when I edit this, aren't I, to make sure I'm not demonetized by all the gore. But there we go, that's point 3 on the list. Give them a history of evil. And yes, we're doing a list now, apparently. And again, point 1 is to give them power, and point 2 is to give them a credible motivation for committing evil.
Paramount Plus is available on YouTube. Enjoy the Dexter universe.
It's me, Harrison. If anyone knows how powerful urges can be, it's me. I'm tired of being careful.
Watch the new series Dexter Resurrection and get more of your favorites with MGM Plus, Stars, and more. Subscribe to Paramount Plus.
But here's what I believe to be the most effective way by far to make any villain scary. In fact, I think it's so important a thing to get right, the entire rest of this video will be nothing but breaking this 4th point down. And that is to surround your villain with uncertainty, where there is a great deal around the villain that is unknown. It's when we don't understand a villain, or at the very least, can't predict what they'll do next. It's when you as a writer ensure that uncertainty is around them in whatever form that may come. That is when any villain is at their most terrifying to your audience. Like, one thing's for sure, Homelander has this quality in spades. He is endlessly surprising us, and this, the fact his character is so good at just shocking and surprising the audience again and again, is a major part, maybe even the most important part, as to why he's so scary. Case in point, when he meets that blind superhero and everyone is all smiles, it's all going great. This guy is meeting his hero Homelander, he's smiling back like, oh, this is actually quite a nice moment. That is until suddenly...
What happens if, I don't know, I do this?
And it got a reaction out of everyone. Like, it works great. Because if we had, I don't know, like a Tarantino-esque build-up of tension, where he's making his hatred for the disabled known, and he's acting all sinister and saying ominous things, we would have seen it coming. And not doing that, going for the shock over suspense approach, reinforces the idea that Homelander is truly unpredictable. Like, he's capable of murdering anyone at a moment's notice with no apparent reason. It'll make perfect sense after as to why he did it. In this case, we realise that he hates ordinary heroes enough anyway, as they're all weaker than him. But this guy is just an insult in Homelander's eyes. He's disabled, after all, and how can someone as pathetic as him dare claim to be a hero and aspire to join the Seven, no less? He should have known his place. That's what was going through Homelander's mind, because his mere existence triggered Homelander's narcissism in all the wrong ways. But interestingly, we learn this motivation after the act, not before. And because of that, as well as because of the many other moments like this, how he murders so many people at the drop of a hat, they reinforce the idea that he could kill anyone he's with on screen. Which again plays back into point 3, because we're acutely aware of the degree of evil of which he is capable. But we've seen no end of scenes where Homelander basically just sits someone down and there's a threat that, ooh, he might hurt them, he just might kill them, and terror is derived from that. But what I feel is a scene that's way more interesting to look at here, and what reveals something fascinating about writing terrifying characters, is the one at the end of Season 2, where he confronts a SWAT team inside his home. And despite the fact this scene ticks off every prior point, the power differential is insane, he has this history and context of doing evil, he's got a great motivation to inflict harm, there's very little suspense in this scene. It had very little terror. But by all means, though, this is a fun scene. Like, it's perfectly entertaining, but compared to his other scenes, it's just not very scary. And yes, a part of the reason why is obviously that we just don't care about these characters, right? That they're basically red shirts who we don't care if they die. But I reckon the main reason why is because this scene failed to tick off point 4 on the terrifying villain checklist, because the outcome of the scene is entirely predictable. Like, he's already been riled up because he was lured away from his house with a sonic noise, and when he comes back, he finds his son missing and a SWAT team in his stead. And when Homelander just calmly closes the door, like, we know everyone in the room is already dead. Like, there's no question about it. And the fact we know that robs the scene of the terror and suspense it could have otherwise had. And I know this is a really odd comparison to make, but when you have an illness, right, you've got some persistent symptom that's just never going away, knowing precisely what the cause is infinitely easier to deal with mentally than having absolutely no clue. Like, even if the diagnosis is rather grim, because it's the not knowing. It's when you have no clue what's going on or what's about to happen. That is the most terrifying thing in the universe. The fear of the unknown. In this scene, it wasn't terribly scary, because every last thing was known. It was totally predictable that they'd all die, a fact the writers seemed to know full well, as they skipped showing the fight entirely, and just cut to him walking out later, smeared in blood. But in order to go deeper here on why uncertainty is such a terrifying thing, and why you should always ask how you can inject more of it into any given scene of yours, is how suspense and terror go hand in hand so often that you might as well think of them as the same thing. If we had to define it in a practical term, suspense is fundamentally a question. The question of, will X terrible thing happen, or will it not? And skimp out on including this at your story's peril, because when you boil it down, this question is at the heart of all great stories. Will they save Private Ryan? Will Woody and Buzz make their way back to Andy's house? Will the characters survive Jurassic Park? And so on. It's the probability of us getting a bad answer to those questions changing over the course of any given scene or story. That is the increasing or decreasing level of suspense and, correspondingly, terror. For all intents and purposes, this shifting probability of getting a bad answer to the core question is the rising action of any given story. Or at least that's the way I perceive it. But here's the thing, if suspense is all about uncertainty, and if your villain can always be relied upon to act with malice, suddenly your villain is no longer that terrifying. Like, they're not suspenseful anymore, because now the audience can predict everything they ever do. And because suspense is so tightly linked with terror, in a sort of way, a predictable villain is rarely a terrifying one for exactly this reason.
Alright, let's get this workout.
Let's crush it.
Co-pilot, how's my squat looking?
I'd suggest keeping your core tight.
Now I feel it. Only deadlifts and lunges left, right?
Don't forget about the planks.
Let's try it.
But how do you make your villains unpredictable? Like, what are some practical ways you can inject uncertainty into their makeup? Well, there are so many different ways I couldn't even dream of listing them all here. A proven and great approach is to derive it from whether or not the villain knows key information, which would prove disastrous should they turn out to know it. The mere question of whether or not they know this certain thing can be fuel for great suspense. A case in point, pretty much all of Hans Lander's scenes in Inglourious Bastards do exactly this. Or you could derive it from whether or not they'll kill someone after they've triggered Homelander's narcissism. You can even derive uncertainty from whether or not a coin toss will turn out to be heads or tails, provided you've set up what's at stake before the coin is flipped. Another method you can take is to give them a hair trigger, where they do depraved things even when given only the lightest motivation. While this is a potentially great approach, God knows Homelander is like this, don't take it too far. For example, if you have a villain who kills his underlings, every time they ever make even a minor mistake, that gets old quite fast. That's honestly pretty cliche. Did you guys know that in Return of the Jedi, there was a scene where Darth Vader strangles yet another Imperial officer, but Lucas deleted it because he recognised that Vader strangling his underlings as routinely as one brushes one's own teeth was getting pretty boring to watch. Like, even Homelander routinely spares Ashley because, yes, she's annoyed him many times, so he'd definitely kill her if she was anyone else, but she's just too useful for him to kill off. I'm just saying, having your villain killing their underlings doesn't make them terrifying, it makes them just look like a woefully incompetent employer, so probably don't do it too often. But this is a possible approach for you to take. Establish very clearly that if they're given a reason for malevolence, and no matter how slight, no matter how tiny, someone disrespecting them, someone simply saying the word no to them, they have the capacity to act upon that with the utmost prejudice. Doing so will mean they're less like Thanos and more like Homelander, where all they have to do is merely exist in the scene, and suddenly everyone's walking on eggshells, trying desperately to not piss them off. And the moment someone says something, even slightly poorly worded, Homelander just gives them a dead stare, and the tension ratchets way up for it. This being said, I can't help but think that Hans Lander is also a terrifying villain, but he doesn't really have a hair trigger, does he? He's a relatively composed guy who has full self-control, yet he's widely acknowledged as one of cinema's most scary antagonists. So giving him a volatile personality seems to be an optional yet perfectly tenable way nonetheless to make your villain a terrifying one. Oh wait, now I'm remembering Eddie Redmayne's character in Jupiter Ascending, where they did exactly this and he just screamed all the time. And it didn't make him scary, it more just made him come across as a pathetic man-child.
Double our security deployment to destroy any ship that comes near the planet.
I think a big part of why that villain is such a weak one is because he was so volatile, it made him come across as completely incompetent. Like, congratulations, you've made him unpredictable, and you've done it at the expense of making him so incapable of self-control and being so childishly immature, it's hard to not laugh every time he's on screen.
I create life! And I destroy.
So be careful with this one. While it's true that volatility is a trait that works great in some villains, it's not necessary for them to be scary, and it even has the potential to backfire horribly if you go too far with it. Another way writers totally fail at injecting uncertainty into their villains is by making them insane. Now obviously it's perfectly fine to write mad characters, but the problem here arises because the writer may treat their madness as free license for them to do literally anything, to act randomly, to effectively commit the cardinal sin of characterization. That is, to have a character who doesn't have a motivation for what they do. Because being mad on its own is not just a bad motivation, it doesn't even classify as a motivation. Thankfully, most writers don't make this mistake, though, when they're writing insane villains, but I feel it's a common enough mistake that it's worth bringing up here. Look, I hate to break it to those writers, and I also hate to break it to Eddie Redmayne, but that isn't the way the human brain works. Even if someone is clinically insane, they will have their own unique pathology, and within that pathology, they will be consistent, and they will have a motivation for all they do. Like, while it's a perfectly fine approach to have a truly volatile villain who needs only like the tiniest of motivations to inflict harm, never, under any circumstances, have it so they don't actually need a motivation. And especially, never justify nonsensical choices by saying, well, they're mad, therefore I can be as lazy as I like with my writing. Like, that right there is incredibly lazy writing, because you're not doing your due diligence. I'd say if you're writing an insane character, and you don't even know what the condition is they're suffering from, or at least the terrible philosophy that drives them, you're doing something wrong. Instead, make the effort to establish a framework they think within, their pathology, and have everything they do make sense within that pathology. Look at the Joker from The Dark Knight. Christ, I can't go 2 videos without mentioning this bloody film, can I? But he has a very well-established nihilism about him, with Alfred talking about how some men want to watch the world burn. And this motivates all he does. Then look at No Country for Old Men. Like, that film has an absolutely bone-chilling villain, and he's a textbook psychopath. A purely selfish man who cares only for his personal benefit. And by the way, like, the Coen brothers absolutely nailed psychopathy in this film, while other writers take the laziest path and have their villain act randomly because, and only because, well, they're mad. The Coen brothers did their research, and they couldn't have done a more perfect job at depicting someone with this condition. Like, everything Javier Bardem's character says and does in this film is something a true-to-life psychopath might do in the real world. He is an unpredictable villain, one with a major mental condition. Yet, everything he does makes sense. Nothing is unmotivated. Like, honestly, No Country for Old Men is a great example of another way to introduce uncertainty into a villain. Because when you nail a mental condition such as this, these kinds of characters become terrifying in their own unique way. Because yes, they have their well-defined pathology, but the audience doesn't quite grasp exactly how that pathology works, which means we never quite know what they'll do next. If you don't understand the character, that means you can't predict them, and that makes them all the more terrifying. This advice applies to writing horror too, as well as writing great villains. Because look at Aliens. In the scene where the Marines are creeping through that alien nest, it's a terrifying scene, because it's using this approach. This scene is suspenseful not just because they're, about to be attacked, it's also because we're glimpsing a whole aspect of this monster's life cycle we've never seen before. We know exactly what the xenomorph looks like. We saw one in the prior movie, but nonetheless, they're terrifying here, because the audience and the characters once thought they understood these monsters, but now realize they have no clue what they're up against.
Some things are just better together. Introducing U.S. Bank Business Essentials, a powerful combination of checking and card payment processor with no monthly maintenance fee and quick access to the money you've earned. Together, we can make managing your business easier. That's the power of us.
T-Mobile Home Internet is about value, benefits.
What's he doing, Zach?
I'm rehearsing for our T-Mobile Home Internet commercial. There are so many benefits and awards, you gotta talk really fast.
Well, let me try. T-Mobile Home Internet ranks #1 in customer satisfaction for home wireless internet by J.D. Power.
Wow!
Try singing it. Just one chord, it's an easy set. We're a pretty good duo.
It's pronounced duet.
Get T-Mobile Home Internet, just $35 a month with our 5-year price guarantee.
What is that?
The fear of the unknown is the greatest fear of them all, and great writers will not just exploit this fear when writing in horror, but also in general when writing terrifying villains, no matter what genre they're in. And if you're writing a monster for a horror story, all of these points still apply just as much. Ensure that somehow there is incredible uncertainty around the monster, whether it be us not knowing where the monster is as our heroes navigate the never-ending jungle in Predator, or us not knowing the gruesome details of their life cycle like in the Alien series, or the sheer paranoia of determining who the monster is masquerading as in The Thing. That right there is how you make truly great horror. As an aside, I've seen a fair few film critics say that you must never show the monster on screen, else it will ruin the audience's fear of them. Like as an ironclad rule, only show partial glimpses of the monster and save the full body shot of them until the climax. This, I think, is frankly bollocks. This is terrible advice, because it's failing to display a full understanding of the issue. As an example, look at The Thing, what many people claim as the most terrifying movie they've ever seen. Yet, we see the monster fully in action, fully on screen, time and time again throughout. That film worked so well because John Carpenter understood it's uncertainty around the monster that makes them scary, not the ability to merely see them with your eyes. And that runs contrary to what some people out there would have you believe. But to boil the entirety of Point 4 down into a single sentence, uncertainty in a villain is invariably terrifying. Inconsistency, however, is always to be avoided. But on this whole topic of unpredictability, there's a really important lesson we can take away from Homelander on this one. Because why is Homelander just so much more scary than other villains? What specifically makes him so unique? Well, firstly, he ticks off every single point we've mentioned so far in the video. But there's something a lot more going on under the hood of his character. It's not how he's fine with mass murder and GBH, because there are so many characters in fiction who are fine with all of that. What makes him so much more scary is because he has incredible motivation to not indulge in those things. He's a through and through narcissist who cares incredibly about how people perceive him. He loves to murder people, for it reinforces the idea that he is indeed superior. He loves exerting power by harming others because it bolsters his perception that, yes, he really is the most fabulously perfect living thing on planet Earth. However, he also loves being loved. In fact, arguably, loves that more than he does killing. And if he indulges in that first love of his too much, it will ruin his public image, the one thing he cares about most in the world. It's all narcissism, but these two sides of his narcissism compete against each other in all the right ways. Like, it's kind of yin-yang. Like, these two motivations of his are endlessly battling against one another, maximizing his dramatic potential as a character, as we truly don't know which side will win out, giving him an unpredictable quality that villains like Darth Vader, for example, simply don't have.
During the back-to-school sale at Denver Mattress. Buy any Denver Mattress brand mattress and get a second half off, or get 60 months no interest and free shipping. The back-to-school sale, only at Denver Mattress.
It feels kind of inevitable that at some point down the line, Homelander is going to break bad, fully abandon his efforts to be loved, and become a tyrant that everyone fears. It's going to happen at some point, but I reckon the creators should do everything in their power to stave that off until the very final season of The Boys, to keep Homelander in his current status quo for as long as possible, because if the show does go down that path of him trying to take over the world, all of a sudden, Homelander is now way less suspenseful as a villain, because he's now lost these two competing motivations. Now, that isn't to say he'll suddenly become a boring character, but it is to say this finely tuned balance of incompatible desires will be completely gone when this happens, and instead he'll now have these two highly compatible motivations to kill those he doesn't like and be feared. Those two would naturally feed into each other, making him far more predictable, meaning the scenes he's in are a hell of a lot less terrifying for it. But that's another important takeaway we can get from Homelander's character, and it's so important, actually, it's bleeding out from the main topic of terrifying villains, and in how to do good characters in general. Any given character who has multiple motivations that compete against each other is inherently more dramatic a character than someone who merely has one. Even if this person is your protagonist, if one of their motivations is good and the other evil, and the two cannot be fulfilled at the same time, the unpredictability that generates means there's gonna be so much more suspense around what they'll do, as opposed to someone who merely has one motivation, no matter how evil that motivation is. But if you want to carry on the conversation, don't bother with making a comment, because I've got a Discord server geared for writers, and we talk about, you know, our characters, and we workshop ideas, and as well as all the movies we like anyway. I'm on this server every day, so if you want to talk about this video, ask me questions, and frankly just discuss any writing-related issue you're dealing with, me and my growing community of writers would love to have you on our server, and there is a link down below in the description. Also, if you haven't checked out Audible already, I really do recommend you give their site a go. I genuinely use Audible daily because it's just so useful to me, and you can find a link for that in the description too. But anyway, thanks for watching, keep writing, and I'll see you guys next time on The Closer Look.